I just realized I forgot to put my little banner up. This is a pandemic makeover for Candy Cane Calamity. All this week, every day I have done a different winter or Christmas STEM challenge and given you some tips and ideas for how you can change it to make it work for social distancing or distance learning. And today is our final day of the week. Woohoo, we made it. I want to remind you that if you missed any of the other videos and you wanted to see them, you can find them in two places. One is on the Christmas STEM blog, and you can use the bit.ly link to go check that out, and you'll see all five. They're embedded there. And in fact, what's kind of nice is you'll see the original video for a normal year, followed by the video that is for this year for the pandemic sort of alterations that you might want to make. And all of that is case sensitive, so you want to keep it lowercase. Or you can also find them on my YouTube channel. If you go to Feel Good Teaching or search Feel Good Teaching on YouTube, I have my things organized by playlist. So if you find the Christmas winter playlist, you'll see them all on that list as well. This one isn't there yet, but I'll tag it and make sure it's there after the fact. Okay. So let me take this ticker off. Let me dive right in. So Candy Cane Calamity is the basic gist of the challenge is that it's almost like an egg drop, but for Christmas, and we can change it up too. You can make it less Christmassy if you don't want to use candy canes. But the students are going to create a lightweight package for shipping candy canes that results in no breakage. Now, first substitution that can make this a little bit simpler to manage is to not use candy canes and instead substitute some kind of thin, fragile cookie. So if you are going to make the cookies because you're a baker, roll cookies like sugar cookies or like thin gingerbread cookies are really good ones to use because they want to break easily. If you want to do store-bought cookies, I'd recommend doing, those Keebler ones that have like the fudge stripes on them. So they're circles. I always used to put my pinky through them and eat them around in like in a circular fashion. But those ones that are like shortbread cookies with the little fudge swirls on them and they have fudge on the back, those are pretty fragile and those can work really well. So those would be my recommendations. Now, here's a tricky part. But make sure sorry, I want to make sure I actually shared my screen back. Sometimes I forget. So the lightweight portion of this challenge, usually what we do if we're in class is I would use a scale to weigh each of the group's packages. And usually I would give each group 2 candy canes. Then I always have some extra candy canes ready because even during the testing phase or while they're designing, sometimes they break. Sometimes you break them getting them out of the package. So I always used to buy extra. But cookies could make this a little bit easier, but the weighing, I think what we might need to do if your kids are at home is just give up on that portion of it, not expecting them to have a scale, but instead have them explain to you or record if they're using slides or you're using the handouts, have them record where they addressed that issue of it being lightweight. What did they do? What decisions did they make with that in mind? So another thing that I would say is you don't want to let them use any boxes. Anything that's already a box is too easy. I don't want them to take an Amazon box that already exists because that's already taking a lot of the work out of it. Now, if they have individual cardboard scraps and they want to sort of form it into a box, that works. If you want to make this challenge a little bit harder for your kids, just let them use fewer rigid materials. So things like craft sticks, things like that tough cardboard that packages already come in, the less you let them use of that, the harder this challenge becomes. But you could let them substitute anything. Like, they might not have cotton balls to use, but they might, decide to use a sock. They're not actually mailing it. So, you don't have to worry about them, not having it. So maybe they use socks or maybe they use, paper towel or a little bit of toilet paper or something to cushion the fall. But rather than expecting them to have a scale, I don't want to get rid of the essence of the challenge, which is 2 parts. We want to protect the candy canes, but we want it to be as lightweight as possible. And the real world reasoning is if we were really shipping this, the more it weighs, the more it costs. So we want to keep the weight down as much as possible, but you can just have them tell you how. How did they decide? I decided to use a lunch bag instead of using this. I decided to use that instead of this other thing. So no boxes, fewer rigid materials. And then when you get to the testing portion, what I would usually do in a class is kind of a similar thing that I would do in an egg drop. I tend to test at different levels, if that makes sense. But what I usually do is I might have them, if they're, since they're testing their own designs and it's only against themselves, I might say, okay, the first test is going to be to hold up your package. Now, if they're at home, you don't want them standing on carpet though. Try to see if you can get them to either a vinyl or a laminate, or maybe even outside on their porch if they have permission, because it needs to drop on something that's hard for it to be sort of a similar or fair test. But I might say the first thing you're going to do is you're going to hold the package up at your waist level and drop it, and then check and make sure, are the candy canes or the cookies okay? Great. If they are, then the next drop is going to be shoulder level. Now, if you're in class, you can actually, like, put marks on the wall, or, mark off with tape or whatever. But this is just as simple, if they're testing against their own designs, then they don't need to worry about competing necessarily with each other. So I wouldn't worry necessarily that they're different height students or whatever in the class. But then drop it from shoulder level, and then drop it as far up as you can reach. And if you're okay with letting them stand on a chair to do the next level test, you can do that as well. Let me see about, am I still sharing my screen? No, see, I do that all the time. When I come back on screen, I forget to go back and share. I didn't mean to leave the testing thing on both of these slides, but some ideas for extensions for this challenge. One, since we're talking about a candy cane breaking, that puts my brain into physical versus chemical changes. So I think this is a nice lead into that. Talking about the differences between the two, and then looking for examples in the real world, maybe in their own kitchens. And then another thing, if you do have access to the weight of the package, or you could just create one, like you could say, if your kids have internet access, you could say, I am I'm in a tricky situation. I have a package and it weighs 3 pounds, 5 ounces, and I need it to get to my, choose an address, doesn't matter. I want to send it to the Statue of Liberty. I want to send it to my parents or whatever. I wouldn't use real addresses, but maybe your school's address and then some other public address. And then ask your students to do some research and figure out what's the cheapest way to get this package from here to there by Christmas. Or if you're trying to keep it more in the winter zone, then you can say before the end of the week, or before the end of the year, and see what they can find out. And that actually can be really interesting to see what they come up with, because there's so many ways and different vendors, right? Because they could do USPS, FedEx, UPS, DHL. There's probably others, and figure out what's the cheapest way to get it there on time. So that can be a nice real world application. And that's kind of the gist of it. Honestly, of all the five, this is probably the one that I think is trickiest to manage with the social distancing and distance learning, because I'm assuming that I'm not able to get materials to my students who are at home. So I'm looking at this from thinking from your perspective. You might not be sending home materials packets. So what do they already have on hand? And I can't guarantee they're going to have a candy cane or a cookie on hand. So I do think this is probably the one I'd be least likely to do in this current environment, which is why I saved it for the last day. It is a great challenge. It's a lot of fun to do when you're in class, when you're together. So if you are, don't give up on it. I would still do it if I had kids in class. And but anyway, that's where we're at. If you missed one of the earlier ones, I will just restate something I said earlier in this week. The top ones that I would do, snowman stretch is by far the simplest one in terms of materials for you, for your kids in class, for your kids who are at home. And it's extremely versatile. And sometimes it's really hard to get both of those things together in the same challenge for it to be really accessible and actually have so many different options for making it rigorous if you want it to be, which I hope you do, but I get sometimes not. That's my number one suggestion. Number two is sled and slope. I think those are really accessible materials and also super rigorous if you want it to be. I kind of went in order this week, although I would say reindeer relay. I'd probably move reindeer relay up above Frozen Fortress, and I'd leave Frozen Fortress and Candy King Calamity toward the end. Oh gosh, it's hard. I feel like I'm choosing between children right now. These are some of my I always say it though. These are my favorites. These are some of my favorites. It's because every time we get to that portion of the year, it is my favorite thing to do. So I guess that's everything. If you end up having questions, or if you guys do the challenges and you run into problems, I am open to hearing about those and like bouncing ideas off each other to sort of figure out how to fix it for next year or even for this year. Or if your kids have done it and you have feedback for me and or pictures of their designs, that like makes like seriously, it makes my day, makes my week, makes my year. I love seeing what kids are making and creating with these. So please don't be a stranger if you do these challenges, even if it doesn't turn out well. That doesn't bother me either, because there's so many teachable moments that can happen when something fails or when something doesn't work out, and I want to hear about it either way. So all right, I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Get some rest, some relaxation. Hopefully you're off next week. If you're not, you should be for a few days, I hope, at least. And I'm sure we'll see each other soon.